The scent of pine and frost clung to everything in the sanctuary, a bitter perfume that masked the underlying tension. Winter had descended upon the Silverclaw Packlands with unusual ferocity, forcing everyone into closer quarters than comfort allowed. Blood had been spilled on these lands before. 20 years ago, the Great Border War had nearly destroyed their pack, and the memories of that terrible time still lingered like ghosts in the ancient stone walls of the Great Hall. Alaric Wolfstone had been merely a young warrior then, his face unlined by the weight of leadership, his eyes still bright with the fire of youth. The battle cries echoed in his memories as he stood against the invading Iron Pelt pack, watching his father fall before him. He had taken up the mantle of leadership amid the blood and chaos, rallying the remaining warriors to push back their enemies. Now, as Alpha King, those memories followed him like shadows, a constant reminder of what was at stake if he failed his people. Arya Frostbloom pulled her threadbare sweater tighter around her shoulders, trying to appear smaller as she navigated the crowded main hall where pack members gathered for the monthly assembly. Being an Omega in a world dominated by alphas and betas meant learning how to move like a ghost, how to fade into backgrounds, how to make yourself forgettable. Her pale blonde hair, the one feature she couldn't easily conceal, was tucked beneath a simple knitted cap, a gift from her grandmother before she passed. She had woven it with strands of her own silver hair, telling her, "When you wear this, child, you carry my protection." The memory of her grandmother's words had become her talisman in moments like these, when her heart hammered against her ribs and her palms grew damp. The ancient code dictated the structure of their society with unwavering certainty. Alphas led and protected, betas served and fought, and omegas healed and nurtured. But the Silverclaw pack was known throughout the wolf territories for its unwavering adherence to tradition, its fierce warriors, and its proud bloodlines. An orphaned omega like Arya, with no lineage to speak of, existed on the periphery of their world, tolerated but never truly accepted. Her grandmother's final words echoed in her mind. "Our power belongs not to ourselves, but to those who need it most." A simple creed that had guided her training in herbal medicine and healing arts. The Omega gift of healing was rare and precious, particularly in times of conflict. And conflict, Arya sensed, was brewing once again. "Make way for the Alpha King!" The command boomed through the hall, and the crowd parted like water breaking against stone. Arya pressed herself against the rough wooden wall, ducking her head as Alpha Alaric entered with his entourage. He moved with the confidence of a man who had never questioned his place in the world, his shoulders broad beneath a cloak of midnight fur, his dark beard neatly trimmed around a jaw that rarely softened in smile. Deep lines etched the corners of his storm-gray eyes, testament to the 15 years he had ruled the Silverclaw pack with an iron will and unflinching dedication. At his side walked his beta commanders, and behind them, trailing with reluctant steps, was a boy of perhaps 7 or 8 years. The Alpha King's son. Even from her position at the periphery, Arya could sense the pup's distress. His small face was contorted in a scowl that mimicked his father's, but his eyes betrayed a wild panic. This was Prince Fenrir, the subject of endless pack gossip. His mother, the former Luna, had disappeared 3 years ago, leaving her mate and child behind. Since then, the boy had become notorious for his hatred of women. No female attendant lasted more than a few days in his presence before being driven away by his tantrums and cruelty. "The winter has brought challenges," Alaric began, his voice filling the hall without effort. "The eastern border has reported 3 rogue wolf incursions this month alone." Arya should have been listening. Pack meetings were mandatory after all, but her attention remained fixed on the boy. He was tugging at his ceremonial jacket, his distress growing more evident by the second. Then, as if sensing her gaze, he looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and in that instant, something inexplicable passed between them. Not warmth, not understanding, but a moment of pure recognition. The pup's eyes widened, then narrowed to slits. He bared his small teeth at her in what could only be described as a snarl. What happened next shocked everyone in the great hall. With a feral growl that seemed impossible from such a small frame, Prince Fenrir tore away from his father's side and lunged through the crowd directly toward Arya. Pack members scrambled to get out of his way, more from surprise than fear. Before anyone could react, the young prince had reached her, small fists pounding against her legs with surprising force. "No more women! They all leave! They all lie!" he screamed, his voice breaking with emotion that went beyond mere anger. This was pain, raw and unbridled, the kind that came from the deepest wound a child could suffer: abandonment. The hall fell silent, the collective breath of the pack held in shock. No one touched the Alpha's son without permission. No one. Acting on instinct rather than reason, Arya dropped to one knee, bringing herself to the boy's level. She didn't attempt to restrain his flailing hands or soothe him with empty words. Instead, she simply existed in his storm, letting him expend his fury while she remained steady. His small fists continued to strike, though with diminishing force, against her shoulders. "I hate you," he spat, his small chest heaving. "I hate all of you." "I know," Arya said quietly, surprising herself with the calm in her voice. "That's okay." His assault paused momentarily, confusion crossing his features. He'd clearly expected fear, tears, or anger, the usual responses he provoked from women in the pack. Her acceptance of his hatred seemed to bewilder him. The crowd around them had drawn back, forming a circle of wary onlookers. From the corner of her eye, Arya could see Alpha Alaric approaching, his expression unreadable, but his posture tense, ready to intervene. "You smell like pine trees," Fenrir accused, as if this were somehow a personal affront. Arya nodded. "I gather pine resin for medicine. It gets in your skin after a while." The boy's nostrils flared as he drew in her scent more deliberately. Something in his rigid posture softened almost imperceptibly. Arya knew this moment was precarious. One wrong move could reignite his rage, or worse, draw the Alpha's punishment for her presumption in addressing the prince so directly. "Fenrir!" Alpha Alaric's voice cut through the tension. "Return to my side." The boy hesitated, his eyes still locked with Arya's. In that suspended moment, she saw past his anger to the wounded creature beneath, a child whose mother had left, whose father was distant, whose world had been defined by abandonment. She recognized that pain because it lived in her too, an old companion that had shaped the contours of her existence since her parents had perished in a territory dispute when she was barely older than Fenrir was now. "It's okay to be angry," she whispered low enough that only he could hear. "But it isn't okay to stay that way forever. It gets heavy after a while." Something flickered in his eyes, not understanding perhaps, but a kind of grudging curiosity. Then he turned and walked back to his father, though his usual stomping was replaced by a more measured pace. The assembled pack members released a collective breath, the tension in the hall diffusing slightly. Alpha Alaric rested a hand briefly on his son's shoulder before continuing his address, but his gaze lingered on Arya for a moment longer, assessing, calculating. She lowered her eyes respectfully, but not before noting the faint surprise in his expression. Had he expected her to crumple under his son's assault? To cry out? To flee? Whatever he had anticipated, her calm acceptance of the prince's rage was clearly not it. She had broken the pattern, and in a society as rigidly structured as theirs, such deviations rarely went unnoticed or unpunished. The remainder of the meeting passed in a blur for Arya. Alpha Alaric spoke of strengthening the borders, of preparing for the possibility of coordinated attacks rather than isolated incidents. He mentioned the Northern Alliance, a coalition of packs that had long been hostile to Silverclaw interests, and their recent movements. Through it all, Prince Fenrir remained unusually subdued, occasionally glancing in Arya's direction with an expression that vacillated between suspicion and curiosity. As the meeting concluded, Arya slipped toward the exit, hoping to escape notice. She had herbs steeping in her cottage that needed attention, and the confrontation with the prince had left her drained in a way that physical exertion never did. She had nearly reached the door when a firm hand clasped her shoulder. Turning, she found herself face to face with Commander Gideon Stormheart, the Alpha's most trusted warrior and the pack's head of security. "The Alpha King requests your presence," he said, his voice neutral, but his eyes watchful. It wasn't a request that could be refused. Arya followed him to a side chamber off the main hall, her mind racing through possibilities, none of them particularly comforting. Had she overstepped by engaging with the prince? Would she be banished from the pack for her presumption? Commander Stormheart opened a heavy wooden door and gestured for her to enter. The chamber was warmer than the main hall, a fire crackling in a stone hearth that took up nearly an entire wall. Alpha Alaric stood before it, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the flames, while Prince Fenrir sat in a chair nearby, his legs swinging without quite touching the floor. "Leave us, Gideon," Alaric said without turning. The commander inclined his head and withdrew, closing the door behind him. Arya stood just inside the threshold, her hands clasped before her to hide their trembling. Protocol dictated that she should kneel in the presence of the Alpha King, but fear had locked her joints. "What is your name, Omega?" Alaric asked, finally turning to face her. "Arya Frostbloom Alpha," she managed, dropping to one knee belatedly. "Rise." He studied her with those storm-gray eyes. "You are the granddaughter of Alara, the healer." It wasn't a question, but Arya nodded confirmation. "Yes, Alpha. She taught me her craft before she passed." Her skills were renowned throughout the territories. Something like respect flickered across his features. The pack lost a valuable asset when she crossed beyond the veil. "Thank you, Alpha." Arya wasn't sure what else to say. Praise from the Alpha King was as rare as snow in summer. Alaric paced before the fire, his movements measured, controlled. "My son has driven away 17 caretakers in 3 years, experienced betas, respected omegas, all unable to manage a single pup." Fenrir's legs stopped swinging, his small body going tense at his father's words. "He doesn't need managing," Arya said before she could stop herself. "He needs understanding." Alaric's head snapped toward her, his eyes narrowing dangerously. Questioning an alpha, especially the Alpha King, was not done. Arya's breath caught in her throat. She had gone too far. "Explain," he commanded, his voice deceptively soft. Arya swallowed hard. Having opened this door, she had no choice but to walk through it. Prince Fenrir lost his mother. His world was torn apart. His anger isn't misbehavior, it's grief. He's testing everyone around him because he's waiting for them to leave too. "And you know this because?" "Because I did the same after my parents died," she admitted. "I tested my grandmother's patience daily, waiting for the moment she would decide I was too much trouble and abandon me as well. But she never did." Alaric's expression remained impassive, but something in his posture shifted, a slight easing of tension perhaps. He glanced at his son, who was watching the exchange with undisguised interest. "She smells like pine," Fenrir announced suddenly. "Not like the others." "The others?" Alaric prompted. "The women who tried to take Mother's place. They smelled like fear and lies." The boy's face scrunched in disgust. "She doesn't." Arya felt a chill run down her spine. Children often had keener senses than adults, particularly when it came to emotions. If Fenrir had detected deception in his previous caretakers, it might explain his hostility. But what had they been hiding? "I want her," Fenrir declared with the absolute certainty of a child who had rarely been denied. "She can be my new caretaker." Alaric frowned. "Arya is a healer, not a nursemaid. The pack needs her skills." "No!" The prince's face flushed with renewed anger. "I want her. She's different." Arya watched as the familiar signs of Fenrir's rage began to build. The tensing shoulders, the rapid breathing, the clenched fists. But what happened next was unprecedented. A ripple passed through the boy's small frame, like a wave beneath his skin. His eyes, normally a blue similar to his father's, flashed gold for an instant. The change was subtle, quick, but unmistakable to anyone familiar with their kind. The first shift. But it was impossible. Werewolves didn't manifest their wolf forms until puberty, usually around 12 or 13. Fenrir was half that age. Alaric moved with the supernatural speed of an alpha, reaching for his son. But he was too late. The boy's transformation had begun, partial and uncontrolled, but terrifying in its implications. Fenrir's teeth elongated into fangs, his fingernails extending into claws that dug into the wooden armrests of his chair. His growl was no longer that of an angry child, but carried the timbre of the beast within. "Father, it hurts!" The words emerged garbled through a mouth not meant for human speech. Acting purely on instinct, Arya rushed forward, ignoring Alaric's warning growl. She dropped to her knees before the prince and placed her hands on his trembling shoulders. As a healer, she had developed the ability to sense pain, to locate its source within a body. What she felt from Fenrir was agony, the bones attempting to reshape themselves before they were ready, muscles tearing as they tried to accommodate a form the boy was still years from being able to sustain. "Focus on my voice, Fenrir," she said, her tone calm but firm. "Your wolf is trying to protect you, but it's too soon. You need to tell it to wait." The boy's partially transformed face contorted. "I can't." "You can. Close your eyes. Breathe with me." She began a slow, rhythmic breathing pattern, one her grandmother had taught her for calming patients in distress. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Feel the air filling your lungs, then leaving them. That's it. To her surprise, Fenrir complied, his ragged breathing gradually syncing with hers. She felt Alaric's presence behind her, tense and watchful, but he didn't interfere. "Now imagine your wolf curling up inside you, safe and warm, but sleepy. It needs to rest, to grow strong before it can run with you. Can you see it?" Fenrir nodded, his eyes still closed. "Tell it to sleep now. Promise that you'll call for it when the time is right." For several tense moments, nothing happened. Then, gradually, the fangs receded, the claws retracted, and Fenrir's features returned to normal. When he opened his eyes, they were blue again, though glazed with exhaustion. "He listened," the boy whispered, a note of wonder in his voice. "The wolf inside me. He listened to me." Arya released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Of course he did. He's part of you." She became acutely aware of Alaric standing over them, his presence as overwhelming as a gathering storm. Slowly, she withdrew her hands from Fenrir's shoulders and stood, keeping her eyes lowered. "That was a premature shift," Alaric said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "It should be impossible at his age." "Yes, Alpha," Arya agreed softly, "yet you knew exactly how to handle it. My grandmother taught me the theory, though I've never seen it in practice. Premature shifts were more common in the old days, particularly in royal bloodlines during times of great stress." Alaric's gaze was penetrating. "And what does your grandmother's wisdom say about what this means?" Arya hesitated. The old stories were clear on this point, but their implications were troubling. "It suggests a powerful bloodline and unusual circumstances. Often it occurred when the wolf sensed a threat, but lacked the maturity to respond appropriately." "A threat?" Alaric's voice sharpened. "My son was in no danger." "Not physical danger, perhaps." Arya chose her words carefully. "Emotional distress can trigger protective instincts as well." Fenrir had slumped in his chair, the episode having drained him completely. His eyelids drooped as he fought against encroaching sleep. "Father," he mumbled, "I still want her. The wolf likes her." Alaric studied his son's face, then Arya's, his expression inscrutable. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackling of the fire and Fenrir's increasingly deep breathing as exhaustion claimed him. "It seems I have little choice," Alaric said finally. "My son's wolf has recognized something in you that it trusts, and given what we've just witnessed, I cannot ignore that connection." He straightened to his full, imposing height. "Arya Frostbloom, you will serve as my son's caretaker and continue your duties as a healer. Commander Stormheart will arrange for your relocation to the royal quarters immediately." It wasn't a request. Nothing from the Alpha King ever was. Arya's mind raced with the implications of this new role. Living in the royal quarters would place her at the center of pack politics, a dangerous position for someone with no status or protection. "Alpha, I'm not certain I'm qualified. You just prevented my 7-year-old son from experiencing a premature shift that could have caused permanent damage," Alaric interrupted. "I'd say that qualifies you uniquely for this position." His tone softened marginally. "Unless you have objections to serving your pack in this capacity." The ancient code was clear. When the Alpha called, you answered. But beyond that, Arya couldn't deny the pull she felt toward Fenrir, the instinctive desire to protect this wounded child who reminded her so much of herself. "No, Alpha," she replied. "No objections." "Good." He moved to lift his sleeping son. "Commander Stormheart will escort you to gather your belongings. You'll begin your duties tonight." As Alaric carried Fenrir from the room, Arya remained rooted to the spot, the enormity of what had just transpired washing over her. In the span of an hour, her life had been completely upended. She would now live in the heart of the Pack's power structure, responsible for a volatile prince with unprecedented abilities and inexplicable connection to her. A hand on her shoulder startled her from her thoughts. Commander Stormheart had returned, his expression carefully neutral. "The Alpha King doesn't change his mind once it's made up," he said quietly. "Best come collect your things." Arya nodded and followed him from the chamber. As they crossed the now empty Great Hall, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into a story far larger than herself, one with currents that had been flowing long before her birth and would continue long after her passing. Her grandmother had always said that healing was never just about mending bodies, it was about restoring balance. Perhaps that was what the fates had in mind for her now. The royal quarters were housed in the oldest part of the Pack's stone keep, a sprawling structure built into the side of a mountain that had served as the Silverclaw stronghold for 15 generations. Commander Stormheart led Arya through corridors lined with tapestries depicting Pack history, past chambers where betas conferred in low voices, and up a winding staircase to the family wing. The air here felt different, warmer, heavy with the scent of alpha power that permeated the very stones. "These will be your rooms," Gideon said, opening a door to reveal chambers more spacious than any Arya had ever occupied. "The prince's suite connects through that door. The Alpha King's quarters are at the end of the hall." Arya stepped inside, momentarily overwhelmed by the luxury. The plush rugs, the carved furniture, the bed large enough for 3 people. It was a far cry from her small cottage at the edge of the settlement. "Commander," she began hesitantly, "may I ask what happened to the previous caretakers?" Gideon's expression darkened. "They failed to connect with the prince. Some tried to discipline him into submission. Others attempted to coddle him. None understood his pain." He fixed her with a measuring look. "You're the first he's shown interest in since Luna Helena disappeared." The way he said disappeared caught Arya's attention. Not left or abandoned, but disappeared, a word that suggested uncertainty about the circumstances. "Is it known what happened to her?" Arya ventured. "Officially, she left of her own accord during a diplomatic visit to the Moonriver Pack 3 years ago." Gideon's voice was carefully neutral. "She left no message, no explanation. Simply vanished one night. The Alpha King searched for months but found no trace." Before Arya could probe further, a commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Lord Victor Blackthorn, the Alpha King's chief advisor, swept into view, his tall frame draped in the formal robes of his office. Unlike the warrior physique common among betas, Victor was lean and sharp-featured, with calculating eyes that never seemed to miss a detail. He stopped short at the sight of Arya, his expression shifting from surprise to assessment in the space of a heartbeat. "So the rumors are true," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "Our little prince has found a new keeper." Commander Stormheart's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Lord Blackthorn, may I present Arya Frostbloom, granddaughter of Alara the Healer. By order of the Alpha King, she is now Prince Fenrir's caretaker and will reside in the royal quarters." Victor circled Arya slowly, examining her with the cool detachment of someone appraising livestock. "Unusual. The king has previously selected betas with combat training for his son's security. An Omega healer is an interesting choice." "The choice was the prince's," Gideon replied. His wolf recognized her. This revelation clearly surprised Victor. His eyes narrowed as he reassessed Arya with newfound interest. Did it now? How extraordinary. And at such a young age. He smiled, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. You must be very special indeed, Omega Frostbloom, to awaken such instincts in our young prince. Something in his tone set Arya's nerves on edge, though she couldn't pinpoint why. I merely helped him through a difficult moment, my lord. Of course. Victor nodded, his gaze still assessing. Well, I'm sure we'll become well acquainted, given your new position. The royal inner circle is quite intimate. He turned to Commander Stormheart. I was actually looking for you, Commander. There are security matters requiring your attention before the moon rises. Gideon nodded. I'll attend to them shortly. He turned to Arya. Will you be comfortable settling in on your own? Yes, thank you, Commander. Very good. He inclined his head respectfully, then followed Lord Blackthorn from the room, leaving Arya alone in her new chambers. She moved to the window, gazing out over the Silverclaw territory spread below. The winter sun was setting, casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape. From this height, she could see the village where she had spent her entire life, the smoke rising from cottage chimneys, the training grounds where young betas practiced combat, the sacred grove where ceremonies were held beneath the full moon. It all seemed suddenly distant, as though she had crossed some invisible boundary into another realm entirely. A soft knock at the connecting door startled her from her thoughts. Opening it, she found Fenrir, his hair tousled from sleep, his expression uncertain. Father says you're staying with us now, he said, a question hidden in the statement. Yes, I am. Arya knelt to his level, following her instinct to meet him eye to eye rather than tower over him as adults so often did. Is that all right with you? He shrugged, attempting nonchalance but not quite achieving it. I guess so, as long as you don't try to make me take baths all the time like the others did. Arya bit back a smile. Well, occasional baths might be necessary, but perhaps we can negotiate the frequency. Fenrir considered this, then nodded solemnly, as if they had concluded an important diplomatic arrangement. I had a dream about my mother, he said suddenly, his voice dropping to a whisper. She was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't hear her. The abrupt change of subject caught Arya off guard. Do you dream of her often? He nodded. Almost every night, but this dream was different. She looked scared. His small brow furrowed. Do you think she's in trouble? Arya chose her words carefully, aware of the delicate territory they were entering. Dreams can be complicated, Fenrir. Sometimes they show us our fears or wishes rather than reality. But what if she's trying to reach me? What if she needs help? His blue eyes were wide with worry, and Arya was struck by how quickly he had shifted from hostility to trust, sharing his deepest fears with her after knowing her for mere hours. Why don't you tell me more about your dream? She suggested gently. Maybe together we can make sense of it. Fenrir hesitated, glancing over his shoulder as if checking for eavesdroppers, then leaned closer. She was in a dark place, like a cave, and she kept saying, "Beware the shadow in wolf's clothing." Then she tried to tell me something else, but her voice faded away. He clutched at the front of Arya's tunic. What does it mean? The intensity of his gaze was unsettling. Children his age shouldn't carry such weight in their eyes, such fear. I don't know, Arya admitted honestly, but perhaps it will become clearer with time. Before Fenrir could respond, the door to the hallway opened, and Alpha Alaric entered. He paused, taking in the scene before him, his son clutching at Arya's tunic, their faces close in shared confidence. Fenrir, it's time for your evening meal, he said, his tone revealing nothing of his thoughts. The boy released Arya's tunic reluctantly. Can she eat with us? Alaric's gaze met Arya's over his son's head. Of course. She is part of our household now. As Fenrir moved to his father's side, Alaric added, There are clothes in the wardrobe that should fit you, Arya. I'll send someone to collect your belongings from your cottage tomorrow. The implication was clear. She wouldn't be returning to her former home. This transition was permanent and immediate. Arya nodded her understanding, and Alaric led his son from the room, leaving her to prepare for the evening meal. The wardrobe revealed an array of garments far finer than anything Arya had ever owned. Tunics of soft wool, leggings of supple leather, even a formal gown of deep green that shimmered in the lamplight. She selected the simplest outfit she could find, unwilling to draw attention to herself at her first royal dinner. As she changed, her fingers brushed against the small pouch of herbs she kept at her waist, her grandmother's final gift. Inside were rare healing herbs and a small carved wooden wolf that had been Alara's most treasured possession. The old woman had pressed it into Arya's hands with her dying breath, whispering, "Keep it close. It will guide you when the path grows dark." Arya had always assumed it was merely a sentimental token, but now, standing in the heart of the royal quarters with a prince who dreamed prophetic dreams and a king whose gaze seemed to see too much, she wondered if her grandmother had somehow foreseen this moment. Had the old woman known that Arya's path would lead her here, into the center of pack politics and ancient mysteries? As she fastened the pouch securely to her new belt, a folded piece of parchment fell from beneath her pillow. She hadn't placed it there, hadn't even approached the bed since entering the room. With cautious fingers, she unfolded it to reveal a message written in a hasty, slanted hand. "Beware. You too will disappear like the one before." The warning sent a chill down Arya's spine. Someone had entered her chambers, placed this ominous note where she would find it, and departed without detection. Someone who already viewed her as a threat or a target. She quickly folded the note and tucked it into her pouch alongside the wooden wolf. As she did, her fingers brushed against the carving, and for an instant, so brief she might have imagined it, she felt it warm beneath her touch, as if responding to her distress. The sensation faded as quickly as it had come, leaving her uncertain whether it had been real or merely a product of her agitated nerves. Squaring her shoulders, Arya prepared to face the first of many dinners in the royal household, knowing that beneath the civility and protocol, dangerous currents were flowing. Her grandmother had taught her that healing wasn't just about mending wounds. It was about seeing the truth of things, the imbalances that caused pain and discord. Something was deeply amiss in the heart of the Silverclaw pack, and somehow she had been drawn into its center. As she stepped into the corridor, the wooden wolf pressed against her side, a small but tangible reminder of her grandmother's strength. Whatever awaited her in this new role, she would face it with the same resilience that had sustained her through orphanhood and isolation. After all, as Alara had often said, sometimes the deepest wounds were the ones that couldn't be seen, and those were precisely the ones that needed an Omega's healing touch the most. The royal dining hall echoed with silence, punctuated only by the soft clink of silver against porcelain. Arya sat stiffly, acutely aware of the opulence surrounding her. Tapestries depicting ancient wolf battles adorned stone walls, silver candelabras cast dancing shadows, and the table itself was carved from a single massive oak that had witnessed centuries of Silverclaw politics. Alpha Alaric presided at the head, his powerful frame dominating the space even in stillness. Prince Fenrir sat to his right, occasionally stealing glances at Arya as if to reassure himself she remained present. Lord Victor occupied the place of honor at Alaric's left, his lean features animated as he spoke of border patrols and diplomatic concerns. Commander Gideon sat beside Arya, his solid presence oddly comforting amidst the unfamiliar ceremony. "The Northern Alliance grows bolder," Victor was saying, swirling blood-red wine in a crystal goblet. "Their scouts have been spotted within 2 miles of our eastern border." Alaric's jaw tightened. "Provocation, but not yet aggression." "A distinction that grows thinner by the day," Victor countered smoothly. "Perhaps it's time to consider my proposal regarding the Iron Pelt Pack." "We've discussed this, Victor." Alaric's tone carried a warning. "Silverclaw does not secure alliances through arranged matings." Arya kept her eyes on her plate, but her ears caught every word. Politics and power plays surrounded her like invisible currents, dangerous for one unschooled in their navigation. "A traditional approach served your ancestors well," Victor persisted. "Your father secured peace with the River Pack by—" "My father's time is not our own," Alaric cut him off with finality. His gaze shifted to his son, then briefly to Arya. "Some traditions deserve reconsideration." Fenrir pushed his vegetables around his plate, visibly disinterested in the adult conversation, until Victor addressed him directly. "Young prince, how do you find your new caretaker? A significant improvement over the last one, I imagine." The boy looked up, his expression guarded. "She doesn't smell like lies." An uncomfortable silence followed. Victor's smile tightened imperceptibly. "Children and their remarkable senses," he said lightly. "One wonders what other truths they perceive that elude the rest of us." "One wonders," Alaric agreed, his eyes hard as flint as they met his advisors. Commander Gideon cleared his throat. "The border patrols report unusual wolf tracks near the ancient stones, larger than typical rogues with distinctive markings." The diversion worked. Victor's attention shifted to this new information, allowing Arya to breathe more easily. She noted how Gideon had deliberately steered the conversation from dangerous waters, protecting both her and Fenrir from Victor's subtle probing. As the meal concluded, Fenrir's eyelids grew heavy. Arya recognized the signs of exhaustion following his earlier partial shift, a phenomenon that would have depleted his energy reserves significantly. "Alpha," she ventured, speaking for the first time since the meal began, "the prince appears fatigued. With your permission, I should escort him to his chambers." Alaric studied his son's drooping form and nodded. "Commander Stormheart will accompany you. The keep's passages can be confusing after dark." The small procession made their way through torchlit corridors, Fenrir stumbling alongside Arya, occasionally leaning against her for support. When they reached the prince's chambers, a spacious suite decorated with wooden warriors and animal carvings, the boy allowed Arya to help him prepare for bed without protest, a stark contrast to the tales she'd heard of his previous resistance. As she tucked the furs around his small frame, Fenrir grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "You won't leave?" The question contained a vulnerability that broke Arya's heart. "I'll be right next door," she assured him. "Just through that passage." "Promise?" "I promise." The simple exchange seemed to satisfy him. His grip relaxed, and his eyes drifted closed. Within moments, his breathing deepened into sleep. Commander Gideon waited by the door, his expression thoughtful. "You've accomplished more with him in one day than 17 others did in 3 years." "He's not difficult," Arya said softly, adjusting the furs one final time. "He's wounded." A distinction many failed to recognize. Gideon escorted her back to her own chambers. At the threshold, he hesitated. Lord Blackthorn wields considerable influence with the Alpha King. He's not accustomed to having his counsel questioned, particularly regarding the prince's upbringing. Arya understood the warning beneath his words. "I'll remember that, Commander." "Gideon," he corrected with the ghost of a smile. "Those who care for the prince's well-being should consider themselves allies." After he departed, Arya moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlit territory below. Silverclaw lands stretched for miles, dense forests, rolling hills, the silver ribbon of the Wolf's Tooth River cutting through the valley. Beautiful, wild, and dangerous, much like the pack that claimed it as their ancestral home. Her hand drifted to the pouch at her waist, fingers finding the mysterious note. "You too will disappear like the one before." The warning echoed in her mind, raising questions about Luna Helena's fate. Had she truly abandoned her mate and child willingly? Or had something more sinister occurred, something others might have reason to conceal? Sleep eluded Arya that night, her thoughts circling like ravens. When dawn painted the eastern sky with pale light, she rose, determined to begin understanding the complex web she had entered. Her first responsibility was Fenrir's well-being, and for that, she needed to comprehend the shadows that haunted him. The prince still slept soundly when she checked his chambers. Taking advantage of this rare quiet, Arya explored her new surroundings, familiarizing herself with the royal wing's layout. Most doors remained closed to her, but one stood slightly ajar, a library, its walls lined with ancient texts and scrolls. She slipped inside, drawn by the promise of knowledge. Her fingers traced leather-bound spines, deciphering faded titles. Pack histories, territorial maps, lineage records, the collected wisdom of generations. A section near the back caught her attention, dedicated to the royal bloodline. She selected a volume detailing the last century and settled into a worn chair. An unexpected place to find an Omega at this hour. Arya startled, nearly dropping the book. Alpha Alaric stood in the doorway, already dressed for the day, his expression unreadable. She rose quickly, lowering her eyes. "Forgive me, Alpha. I didn't mean to intrude." "Knowledge belongs to those who seek it," he replied, entering the library fully. "Though I admit, most in your position would be more concerned with sleep than history." "Fenrir mentioned dreams of his mother," Arya explained carefully. "I thought understanding more about the royal lineage might help me interpret their significance." Alaric's expression darkened. "My son's dreams are troubling?" "Confusing, perhaps, more than troubling." She hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. "He seems to believe Luna Helena is trying to communicate with him." The Alpha's jaw tightened, but his voice remained measured. "Helena has been gone 3 years. Whatever Fenrir dreams comes from his desire for her return, not reality." "Of course," Arya conceded, though unconvinced. Children's dreams often contained truths adults preferred to ignore, as her grandmother had taught her. Alaric approached, towering over her even without intending intimidation. "My son connected with you yesterday in a way he hasn't with anyone since his mother disappeared. I don't understand it, but I respect the wolf's instincts." His gray eyes held hers. "However, I must be clear. Fenrir has suffered enough false hope. Do not encourage these dreams or fantasies of his mother's return. The past is past. He must learn to move forward." "As you wish, Alpha," Arya replied, recognizing the command beneath the conversation. Alaric nodded, apparently satisfied. "The prince's education continues despite his emotional difficulties. His tutors will arrive after breakfast. You'll oversee these sessions, ensuring he participates appropriately." "What subjects does he study?" "Pack law, territorial history, combat fundamentals, and diplomacy," Alaric listed. "The foundations of leadership." "And healing arts?" Arya ventured. "Understanding how to treat wounds could serve a future Alpha well." Surprise flickered across Alaric's features. "An unusual suggestion. Alphas command healers. They rarely become them." "Yet knowing which plants soothe fever or close wounds might save lives when healers aren't present," she countered, then added hastily, "Alpha." He studied her with newfound interest. "You sound like Helena. She too believed leaders should understand all aspects of pack life." Something like pain crossed his expression before vanishing behind his customary reserve. "Perhaps you're right. We'll add basic healing knowledge to Fenrir's lessons, with you as instructor." The concession stunned Arya. Alpha Alaric had a reputation for unbending authority, yet he'd considered her suggestion and adapted his plans accordingly. Perhaps there was more complexity to the man than rumors suggested. Their conversation ended as servants arrived to prepare the library for the day's lessons. Arya retreated to wake Fenrir, her mind processing this new insight into the Alpha King. Behind his stern exterior lay a father who genuinely wished the best for his son, even if his methods seemed distant and demanding. The following days established a rhythm. Mornings began with Fenrir's education, the boy proving surprisingly intelligent when engaged properly. Afternoons included physical training, where Arya observed from a distance as Commander Gideon taught basic combat skills with patient persistence. Evenings brought formal dinners with Alaric and his advisors, political discussions flowing around Arya like water around a stone. Throughout it all, she watched and learned. Lord Victor's influence extended throughout the pack hierarchy, his network of loyal betas occupying key positions. He rarely spoke directly to Arya, but she often caught his calculating gaze following her movements, assessing and measuring. On the 5th night, Fenrir's screams tore through the darkness. Arya rushed from her bed to find him thrashing among tangled furs, his eyes open but unseeing. "Mother, don't go in there! It's a trap!" he cried, his small body contorted in distress. "Fenrir, wake up!" Arya called, grasping his shoulders gently. You're dreaming." His eyes focused gradually, terror giving way to confusion, then recognition. "Arya?" He launched himself into her arms, trembling violently. "She was in the sacred caves again, blood on the stones. She told me to remember the silver button." Arya held him close, stroking his hair as her grandmother had once done for her after nightmares. "It was just a dream," she murmured, honoring Alaric's directive despite her growing unease. These dreams carried too much specific detail for mere childhood imagination. "No," Fenrir insisted, pulling back to meet her eyes. "It's real. I know it. She's trying to tell me something important." The door burst open, and Alaric appeared, alerted by his son's cries. His hair was disheveled, his expression concerned as he took in the scene. "What happened?" Before Arya could answer diplomatically, Fenrir blurted, "Mother came to me again. She showed me the sacred caves where she was hurt." Alaric's expression hardened. "Fenrir, we've discussed this. Your mother left us. These dreams—" "She didn't leave!" the boy shouted, his face flushing with emotion. "She was taken! Why won't you believe me?" The raw pain in his voice hung in the air between father and son. Alaric's shoulders slumped almost imperceptibly. "Because believing that would mean I failed to protect her," he admitted quietly, revealing a vulnerability Arya hadn't thought possible from the formidable Alpha. "It would mean she suffered while I searched in all the wrong places." The confession created a fragile moment of connection. Fenrir's anger deflated, replaced by confusion. "But if she didn't leave us willingly, then many things I've accepted as truth would need reconsidering," Alaric finished. He approached the bed slowly, sitting on its edge with unusual hesitation. "Tell me about this dream." As Fenrir recounted the details, the sacred caves, blood on ancient stones, a silver button with a wolf's head design, Alaric's expression grew increasingly troubled. When the boy mentioned a shadow with fangs hiding in plain sight, the Alpha exchanged a significant look with Arya. "The silver button," Alaric said after Fenrir finished. "Your mother wore one exactly as you described on her formal cloak. It was missing when we found her belongings." Arya's pulse quickened. "You believe his dream holds meaning?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," Alaric admitted, rubbing his face wearily. "But I cannot ignore the specific details. The sacred caves have been sealed since before Helena's disappearance, after a ceiling collapse made them unstable." "Could someone have entered despite the seals?" Arya asked. The old passages had many entrances, some forgotten by all but those who study the ancient texts. Alaric's gaze sharpened. "Tomorrow I'll have Gideon inspect the caves, discreetly." After settling Fenrir back to sleep, with promises to investigate his dreams seriously, Alaric gestured for Arya to follow him into the hallway. Away from his son's ears, his demeanor changed, less the concerned father, more the strategic Alpha. "These dreams trouble me," he said quietly. "Not just their content, but their timing." "Why now, after 3 years of silence? And why do they intensify since your arrival?" "I don't know," Arya answered honestly, "but children often suppress traumatic memories until they feel safe enough to confront them." Alaric considered this. "And Fenrir feels safe with you." "I believe so." "Then you'll continue as his caretaker, but exercise caution. If these dreams contain truth, they suggest treachery within my inner circle." His gaze was penetrating. "Trust no one with what Fenrir reveals, not even those who appear allied with our interests." The warning followed Arya into uneasy sleep, coloring her own dreams with shadowy figures and whispered threats. By morning, her resolve had crystallized. She would protect Fenrir not just from external dangers, but from the weight of knowledge too heavy for young shoulders to bear. Breakfast brought unexpected news. Alpha Alaric announced he would personally inspect the eastern border outposts, where increased incursions threatened pack security. "Lord Blackthorn will oversee administrative matters in my absence," he informed the assembled advisors. "Commander Stormheart will accompany me with a select guard unit." Fenrir's face fell at this announcement. "How long will you be gone?" 3 days, perhaps 4, Alaric replied, his tone softening slightly for his son. "Arya will remain with you. It's time you learned more about pack territories beyond theory." The boy's eyes widened. "I'm coming with you?" "As is Arya," Alaric confirmed, surprising everyone present. "Your education benefits from practical experience." Lord Victor's carefully controlled expression betrayed only the slightest displeasure. "Alpha, the eastern borders have reported rogue wolf activity. Is it wise to expose the prince to potential danger?" "The prince travels with the Alpha King, the pack's strongest warrior, and a full elite guard," Alaric replied smoothly. "His safety is assured. Besides, future leadership requires understanding of our territories firsthand." The decision was made with Alpha finality. By mid-morning, preparations were underway for the royal inspection party's departure. Arya hurriedly packed healing supplies, anticipating potential needs in the wilderness. As she worked, Commander Gideon appeared at her door. "The sacred caves were inspected at dawn," he informed her quietly. "Signs of recent entry were discovered, though the main entrance remains sealed as it has for years." Arya's hands stilled. "Someone used another way in?" Gideon nodded grimly. "And more concerning, traces of blood were found on the ceremonial stones, just as the prince described." The implications chilled her. Fenrir's dreams weren't mere imagination. They contained truths someone had worked hard to conceal. "Does the Alpha know?" "He ordered the inspection himself after your conversation last night. It's why we're suddenly departing for the borders." Gideon's voice dropped lower. "This journey serves two purposes. Officially, we inspect our defenses. Unofficially, it removes the prince from potential danger, while Alaric determines who he can trust." "And Lord Blackthorn?" "Remains here, where his activities can be monitored by loyalists." Gideon's expression remained neutral, but his meaning was clear. Victor had become a subject of suspicion. The journey began shortly before midday. Alpha Alaric led the procession astride a massive black stallion, his presence commanding respect from all they passed. Fenrir rode a smaller mount beside him, his excitement at this adventure evident in his animated gestures. Arya followed on a gentle mare, accompanied by 6 elite guards and Commander Gideon, whose watchful gaze continuously scanned their surroundings. They traveled eastward through Silverclaw territory, the landscape transitioning from settled farmlands to wilder forests. Fenrir peppered his father with questions about territorial boundaries, defensive positions, and historical conflicts, topics from his lessons now brought to life. Alaric answered with surprising patience, occasionally elaborating with personal anecdotes that revealed his deep connection to these lands. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they reached the first border outpost, a fortified structure overlooking the Wolf's Tooth River that marked Silverclaw's eastern boundary. The stationed warriors greeted their alpha with respectful deference, though Arya noted the tension in their postures and the weariness in their eyes. Captain Raymond, the outpost commander, reported increased sightings of unknown wolves testing their defenses. "They probe rather than attack," he explained, as they examined maps in the command room, testing response times, noting patrol patterns. "Scouts before invasion," Alaric concluded grimly. "There's something else, Alpha," Raymond added hesitantly. "These aren't typical rogues. They move with discipline, communicate with signals. 2 nights ago, our patrol tracked one to the boundary line. When confronted, it stood its ground instead of fleeing, as if measuring our warriors." "Intelligent assessment," Alaric observed. "Coordinated tactics." "The Northern Alliance?" Gideon suggested. "Perhaps." Alaric studied the map intently. "Or someone wanting us to believe that." While the warriors discussed strategy, Arya attended to the outpost's injured, 2 guards who had encountered rogues during patrol. Their wounds were defensive rather than retreat injuries, confirming the unusual aggression Raymond had described. As she applied healing poultices, one guard described his attacker. "Biggest wolf I've ever seen, with strange markings on its flank, almost like symbols." "Symbols?" Arya's hands paused. "What kind?" "Couldn't tell exactly. Looked almost painted on, unnatural." The description nagged at her memory. Her grandmother had spoken of ancient wolf cults that marked themselves with ritual symbols, believing it channeled primal power. Such practices had supposedly died out centuries ago, condemned by all packs as perversion of the wolf's pure nature. That evening, they camped within the outpost's walls. After Fenrir had been settled to sleep in the commander's quarters, Arya sought out Alaric and Gideon as they completed a perimeter inspection. "The injured guard described marked wolves," she reported quietly. "It reminds me of stories my grandmother told, the cult of Shadow and Fang, wolf worshippers who corrupted the shifting gift with blood rituals." Alaric's expression darkened. "Those tales belong to history, not our present age." "What if they don't?" Arya pressed, emboldened by urgency. "What if someone has revived these practices? It would explain the organized nature of these attacks, the blood in the sacred caves, perhaps even—" "Helena's disappearance," Gideon finished when she hesitated. Alaric's jaw clenched visibly. "You suggest my mate was taken by cultists?" "I suggest we consider all possibilities," Arya replied carefully, "especially those connecting recent events with Fenrir's dreams." The Alpha remained silent for long moments, staring out into the darkness beyond the outpost walls. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight Arya hadn't heard before. "Helena was investigating old texts before she disappeared. She became obsessed with a prophecy regarding the royal bloodline, something about the Silver Wolf's return during times of great darkness." "The Silver Wolf," Gideon repeated thoughtfully. "The legendary first Alpha of all packs." "Legend claims his bloodline carried special powers," Alaric continued. "Helena believed our son might inherit these abilities, explaining his occasional precognitive dreams, even as a toddler." The revelation stunned Arya. "Fenrir has always had these dreams?" "Less frequently before, and less specific. Helena documented them meticulously." Alaric's expression softened at the memory. "She believed they were gifts, not burdens. I thought her research harmless until she disappeared during a diplomatic visit to the Moon River Pack," Gideon supplied. "A visit suggested and arranged by Lord Blackthorn," Alaric added, his voice hardening, "who also discouraged extensive search efforts, claiming Helena had simply abandoned her responsibilities, citing her unconventional interests as evidence of instability." The pieces began aligning in Arya's mind. And if Victor Blackthorn is connected to these cultists, then he may have orchestrated Helena's removal when her research threatened to expose them, Alaric finished grimly. "A theory I've considered increasingly since Fenrir's dreams intensified." "Why not confront him directly?" Arya asked. "Without proof, accusations against my chief advisor would divide the pack when unity is essential." Alaric's tactical mind was evident in his reasoning. "If Victor is innocent, I lose a valuable ally. If guilty, I alert him to my suspicions before securing evidence." Their conversation ended as a perimeter guard approached with reports of movement in the forest beyond the outpost. The night passed in heightened vigilance, though no attack materialized. By morning, Arya sensed the subtle shift in Alaric's demeanor toward her. She had become more than Fenrir's caretaker. She was now a confidant in matters affecting the pack's future. The inspection continued to 2 additional outposts over subsequent days, each revealing similar patterns of coordinated probing by unknown wolves. Fenrir absorbed everything eagerly, his natural intelligence evident in astute observations that occasionally surprised even his father. The journey also provided opportunities for Alaric to demonstrate leadership beyond theory, resolving disputes among warriors, recognizing excellence, addressing concerns directly rather than through hierarchical filters. On their final evening, camped at the northernmost outpost with plans to return home the following day, Arya found herself unexpectedly alone with the Alpha King. Fenrir had fallen asleep early, exhausted from the day's activities, and Gideon was conducting night patrol rotations. They stood on the outpost's western wall, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant orange and crimson. "My son has changed since you entered his life," Alaric observed quietly. "He smiles again, asks questions, engages with the world rather than raging against it." "He needed someone to listen," Arya replied simply, "to hear the pain beneath his anger." "A skill I apparently lack," Alaric admitted with unexpected humility. Helena understood him intuitively. After losing her, I focused on making him strong enough to survive in a world that had already taken so much from him. Perhaps that was wrong. Not wrong, Arya countered gently. Just incomplete. Strength without understanding becomes brittle. Alaric turned to face her fully, his expression more open than she'd ever witnessed. You speak wisdom unusual for your years. My grandmother's teachings, Arya explained. She believed healing extended beyond physical wounds to the spirit itself. A rare perspective among our kind. His gaze held hers with unexpected intensity. You've brought something into my household that I didn't realize was missing. A balance Helena once provided. The comparison startled Arya. I couldn't presume to replace— Not replace, Alaric interrupted. Remind of possibilities I had forgotten. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet not intimidating. Helena once told me that true strength comes from vulnerability accepted, not denied. I dismissed it as Omega philosophy, unsuited to Alpha leadership. Perhaps I was wrong about that too. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of complementary natures, of strength and healing existing not in opposition, but harmony. Arya felt it like a physical current, this connection forming beyond their shared concern for Fenrir. The moment shattered as a warning horn blasted through the night. Alaric instantly transformed from contemplative leader to warrior alpha. Stay with Fenrir, he commanded, already moving toward the commotion. Arya hurried to the commander's quarters where the prince slept. She found him awake, eyes wide with fear. What's happening? Just a night drill, she lied smoothly, gathering their essential belongings. But we should be ready to move if needed. Shouting and growls erupted outside, belying her reassurance. Fenrir clutched her hand. It's them, isn't it? The marked wolves from my dreams. Before Arya could respond, the door burst open. Commander Gideon stood there, blood streaming from a gash across his forehead. We're under attack, coordinated from multiple directions. The Alpha commands you both move to the central stronghold immediately. They followed him through corridors filled with warriors preparing for battle. The central stronghold, a stone structure at the outpost's core designed as final refuge, already contained the wounded being treated by the outpost's healer. Arya immediately moved to assist, settling Fenrir nearby with firm instructions to remain inside. Where's my father? The boy demanded, his voice steady despite obvious fear. Leading the defense, Gideon answered truthfully. He's the strongest warrior in the territory. This outpost has withstood greater threats. The reassurance fell flat as the sounds of fighting intensified outside. Arya worked alongside the outpost healer, treating slash wounds and broken bones as injured warriors streamed in. The attackers' ferocity was unprecedented, not the calculated probing of previous encounters, but determined assault. A wounded beta described their adversaries between pained breaths. Marked with blood symbols, fighting in formation, some larger than natural wolves. Hours passed in desperate defense. Occasionally, Gideon returned with updates. The outer wall breached, then reclaimed. The eastern approach secured, the northern section under heavy attack. Throughout it all, Alpha Alaric fought at the most threatened points, his battle prowess living up to legendary status. Near dawn, an eerie silence fell. Gideon entered the stronghold, exhaustion evident in his movements. They've withdrawn, for now. My father? Fenrir asked immediately. Wounded but fighting, Gideon reported. He refuses to leave the perimeter until certain the attack has truly ended. Relief washed through the room, though tempered by caution. Arya continued treating injuries, moving methodically from warrior to warrior. When she finally reached Gideon, he winced as she cleaned his forehead wound. This isn't a normal territorial dispute, he said quietly, ensuring only she heard. The attackers specifically targeted areas where Alaric was fighting, as if he was their primary objective, Arya finished, the realization chilling. Gideon nodded grimly. They wanted the Alpha. Or the prince, Arya whispered, glancing at Fenrir, who had finally succumbed to exhausted sleep. If this connects to the cult, to Helena's research about his bloodline, then this journey has exposed them to precisely the danger Alaric sought to avoid. Gideon's expression darkened. We return to the keep immediately. The outpost commander will report this attack as rogues testing defenses. Nothing more. Our suspicions remain private until we can determine who can be trusted. By mid-morning, their party departed, traveling swiftly with doubled guards. Alaric rode at the front, his posture betraying nothing of the wounds Arya had treated before their departure. Deep claw marks across his chest and a bite that had nearly severed tendons in his left shoulder. His accelerated alpha healing had already begun closing the wounds, but the pain remained evident in the tightness around his eyes, visible only to those who knew to look for it. They traveled without stopping, reaching Silverclaw Keep as evening shadows lengthened. Word of their early return had preceded them, bringing Lord Victor Blackthorn and a contingent of Beta advisors to the courtyard to greet their alpha. Arya watched Victor carefully, noting how his eyes assessed Alaric's condition with clinical precision, cataloging weaknesses with barely concealed interest. "Alpha, we received troubling reports of attacks," Victor began, falling into step beside Alaric as they entered the keep. "You should have summoned reinforcements." "The situation was handled," Alaric replied tersely, "though it confirms our concerns about organized aggression rather than isolated incidents." "The Northern Alliance grows bolder," Victor agreed. "Perhaps now you'll reconsider my proposal regarding diplomatic marriage alliances. The Iron Pelt Alpha has a daughter of suitable age for betrothal negotiations." "I'll consider all options after I've rested," Alaric deflected, his tone making clear the discussion was temporarily closed. Victor's gaze shifted to Arya as she helped a sleepy Fenrir dismount. "The prince appears unharmed, though fatigued. Well done, Omega Frostbloom. You've proven your worth beyond expectation." Something in his tone raised Arya's defenses. The compliment carried undertones of assessment, as if she were a tool whose utility he was reevaluating. "The prince's well-being remains my primary concern," she replied neutrally. "As it should be," Victor agreed smoothly. "Speaking of well-being, Alpha, the Council Healer should examine your injuries. Such attacks often leave wounds deeper than apparent." "Arya will attend to them," Alaric stated with finality. "She's proven her healing skills these past days." Victor's expression flickered with something, surprise, perhaps displeasure, before smoothing into practiced deference. "As you wish, Alpha. I've prepared reports on matters requiring your attention during your absence. Shall I bring them to your chambers after dinner?" "Tomorrow," Alaric decided. "Tonight is for recovery." In the royal quarters, Arya settled Fenrir to sleep before turning her attention to Alaric's wounds. The Alpha's chambers were Spartanly elegant, functional luxury without ostentation. He sat before the fire, removing his battle-worn tunic to reveal injuries more extensive than she had initially treated. "You concealed the severity," she observed, examining fresh claw marks across his back. "Appearing weakened before the pack serves no purpose," he replied, wincing slightly as she applied healing salve to the deepest wounds. "These will need stitching," Arya determined, retrieving supplies from her healer's kit. "Even Alpha healing has limits." Alaric submitted to her ministrations with stoic silence, though she felt his muscles tense beneath her fingers. As she worked, the intimacy of the moment struck her, the Alpha King allowing vulnerability before an Omega healer, trusting her not just with his physical well-being, but with knowledge of weakness he concealed from others. "Victor watched you too carefully when we arrived," she noted, keeping her voice low despite their privacy. "Assessing injuries like one might evaluate a wounded rival." "You notice much for one supposedly focused on healing," Alaric observed, though without censure. "Grandmother taught me healing requires seeing beyond the obvious wound to its cause." Arya tied off a stitch with practiced precision. "Victor's interest seems personal." "It is," Alaric confirmed grimly. "We were friends once, before I became Alpha. He expected to be my chief advisor and eventual successor, as his father was to mine. When Helena bore a son, those expectations died. Creating motive for resentment, Arya reasoned. If Helena discovered his connection to these cultists, she became an obstacle to his ambitions. Alaric's jaw tightened painfully, a theory that gains credibility with each new development. The attack specifically targeted you, Arya said, moving to treat wounds on his chest, as if someone knew exactly where you would be, when you would be vulnerable. Few knew our inspection route details, Alaric agreed. Fewer still could coordinate such precise timing. The implications hung heavily between them. If Victor had orchestrated both Helena's disappearance and the recent attack, his reach extended far beyond pack boundaries, suggesting a network of followers embedded throughout the territories. More concerning, his position gave him near unlimited access to Fenrir, to the keep's defenses, to every aspect of pack governance. "What now?" Arya asked, completing the final bandaging. Alaric's expression hardened into alpha resolve. "We continue as if unaware, gathering evidence while I strengthen alliances with trustworthy betas. Gideon will investigate the sacred caves thoroughly, searching for connections between the cult markings and Victor's activities. Meanwhile, you remain at Fenrir's side constantly," Alaric instructed. "If Victor is behind these events, he may view you as either obstacle or opportunity, depending on how he interprets your influence over my son." "And over you?" Arya ventured boldly, recognizing the unspoken element in this complex equation. Alaric's gaze met hers directly, something primal and unguarded flickering in its depths. "That too must be considered," he acknowledged. "Our enemies will use any perceived attachment against us." "Is that what this is? An attachment?" The question escaped before Arya could contain it. For a moment, Alaric's carefully maintained control wavered, allowing her glimpse of the man beneath the alpha mantle, one who had loved and lost, who carried the weight of an entire pack while nursing private wounds, who recognized in her something that resonated with his own nature. "It is unexpected," he admitted finally, "and poorly timed, given our circumstances." The acknowledgement hung between them, neither acceptance nor rejection, but recognition of possibilities emerging amidst danger. Arya finished securing the last bandage, her fingers lingering briefly against his skin. "My grandmother believed healing came in many forms. Some wounds require herbs and stitches, others need truth, justice." "And what do mine need?" Alaric asked, his voice dropping to a register that sent shivers along her spine. "Time," she answered honestly, "and perhaps understanding that strength isn't diminished by accepting help." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around eyes accustomed to hardness, a vulnerability freely offered rather than forcibly exposed. He captured her hand as she withdrew it, holding it with surprising gentleness for one so powerful. "Your grandmother taught you well, Arya Frostbloom," he said softly. "You heal more than flesh." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then, reluctantly, Alaric released her hand. Dawn comes early, and with it, challenges requiring clear heads and steady hearts. Rest while you can. Arya gathered her healing supplies, understanding the dismissal for what it was, not rejection, but prudence. At the doorway, she paused. "Alpha?" He looked up, a question in his gaze. "In my experience, wounds left unacknowledged fester beneath the surface, whether physical or—" She hesitated, then finished with quiet certainty. "Emotional." With that parting wisdom, she returned to her chambers, mind whirling with the day's revelations. Fenrir slept peacefully in his adjoining room, temporarily free from prophetic dreams or waking worries. Arya checked his breathing before settling near the window, gazing out at the moon-washed landscape. 3 weeks ago, she had been a solitary Omega healer living at the pack's margins. Now she stood at its center, entrusted with the future Alpha's care, confidant to the current Alpha's suspicions, potential target for a conspiracy reaching back years. The wooden wolf carving pressed against her side, a reminder of her grandmother's final guidance. Trust what you feel, not just what you see. What she felt was a storm gathering, forces aligning against the Silverclaw bloodline, against Fenrir with his special abilities, against Alaric who stood between his enemies and their ambitions. And somehow, inexplicably, she had become essential to weathering that storm. As if responding to her thoughts, the wooden wolf grew warm against her skin. When she withdrew it from her pouch, moonlight caught its carved surface, revealing delicate silver veining she had never noticed before. The silver seemed to pulse with inner light for brief seconds before returning to normal wood grain. "Show me what I need to see," she whispered to the carving, an instinctive plea to whatever magic it might contain. The wolf remained inert in her palm, its secrets once again concealed. But something had awakened within it, or perhaps within her. Something connected to Fenrir's dreams, to Helena's research, to ancient prophecies about silver wolves returning in times of darkness. Tomorrow would bring renewed confrontation with Victor, continued investigation of cult activities, and the complex dance of pack politics. But tonight had brought something equally significant, the recognition of bonds forming beyond duty or circumstance, connections that might ultimately determine not just their survival, but the future of the entire Silverclaw legacy. Arya closed her fingers around the wooden wolf, making a silent promise to her grandmother's memory. She would protect this wounded family that had unexpectedly become hers, would heal what had been broken, would stand against shadows gathering at their borders. Not just because duty demanded it, but because her heart recognized in them something worth fighting for, a vision of what could be when strength and healing worked in harmony rather than opposition. Outside her window, a lone wolf howled in the distance, a sound both mournful and defiant. Inside, Arya's resolve crystallized into certainty. Whatever came next, she would face it not just as healer or caretaker, but as something the pack hadn't seen in generations. An Omega willing to stand alongside Alphas as equal in importance, different in nature, but essential to restoring balance long lost. Dawn arrived with a heavy mist that clung to the Silverclaw keep like a shroud. Arya stood at her window watching guards change shifts in the courtyard below, noting the increased patrols, a silent acknowledgement of the threat that had followed them home from the borderlands. 3 days had passed since their return, 3 days of careful observation and growing tension. Alpha Alaric had maintained a facade of normalcy, attending council meetings and territorial disputes with his customary authority, though Arya knew his wounds still caused him considerable pain. His public interactions with Lord Victor remained outwardly respectful, giving no indication of his deepening suspicions. Only in private moments did the mask slip, revealing the weight of betrayal and the fierce determination to protect both pack and son. Commander Gideon had organized trusted warriors to investigate the sacred caves, working under cover of routine border security. Their findings, delivered in hushed tones during pre-dawn meetings, confirmed what Fenrir's dreams had suggested. Evidence of ritual ceremonies involving blood sacrifice, markings matching those seen on the attacking wolves, and most disturbing, strands of long blonde hair matching Luna Helena's distinct silver-gold shade. Fenrir himself had grown more settled under Arya's care, his nightmares less frequent, though no less intense when they occurred. The boy showed remarkable resilience, channeling his energy into training sessions with Gideon and healing lessons with Arya. His natural affinity for herbal knowledge surprised everyone, particularly his father, who watched with quiet pride as the prince demonstrated aptitude for both warrior and healer arts. Arya's wooden wolf carving had revealed no further secrets since that moonlit night, returning to ordinary appearance regardless of how intently she studied it. Yet she kept it close always, sensing its importance even if she couldn't understand its purpose. The silver button Fenrir had mentioned in his dream remained elusive. No evidence of it had been found in the sacred caves or among Helena's remaining possessions. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened her chamber door to find Gideon, his expression grave. "Lord Blackthorn has called an emergency council meeting," he reported quietly, claiming new intelligence about the Northern Alliance that requires immediate response. "The Alpha knows?" "He's summoning council members now." Gideon's voice dropped further. Victor requested Prince Fenrir's attendance, citing educational importance for the future Alpha. Alarm coursed through Arya. Fenrir has never attended council before. Exactly. The Alpha refused initially, but Victor pushed the matter publicly, making it difficult to decline without appearing overprotective. Gideon's jaw tightened. I don't like it. This sudden insistence feels calculated. To what purpose? Unknown, but Victor rarely acts without multiple motives. Gideon glanced toward Fenrir's chamber. The Alpha requests you accompany the prince to council, ostensibly as his caretaker. And actually? As another set of watchful eyes. Trust your instincts. They've proven sharp so far. The council chamber occupied the keep's heart, a circular room with stone walls adorned by ancestral weapons and pack banners. A massive round table dominated the space, carved from ancient wood with the silver claw emblem inlaid at its center. 12 ornate chairs surrounded it, each bearing the insignia of different pack functions: warfare, justice, commerce, territory, lineage, and others representing the complex governance structure. Arya entered behind Fenrir, keeping her eyes appropriately lowered as befitted an Omega in formal proceedings. The prince walked with remarkable composure for his age, shoulders straight in imitation of his father's bearing. Alpha Alaric already occupied the largest chair, his expression neutral, though his eyes warmed momentarily upon seeing his son. Lord Victor stood when they entered, gesturing expansively. Young prince, how appropriate that you join us today as we discuss matters directly affecting your future leadership. His smile appeared genuine, though it never reached his calculating eyes. I've taken the liberty of providing a special seat for your education. He indicated a smaller chair positioned slightly behind Alaric's, traditionally where heirs observed counsel before coming of age. The thoughtfulness of this arrangement would appear admirable to anyone unaware of Victor's suspected treachery. The Omega may wait outside, Victor added, dismissing Arya with a casual wave. Arya stays, Alaric countered smoothly. My son's well-being remains her primary responsibility, even during council. Victor's smile tightened imperceptibly. Of course, Alpha. Perhaps she might observe from the antechamber, where her presence won't disrupt formal proceedings. She stays within sight of the prince, Alaric reiterated, his tone ending further discussion. Now, what intelligence demands this emergency session, Lord Blackthorn? Arya positioned herself against the wall behind Fenrir, close enough to reach him quickly if needed, while maintaining appropriate distance from the council table. From this vantage, she observed each member's reactions as Victor began his presentation. Our scouts intercepted a messenger from the Northern Alliance last night, he announced gravely, producing a sealed parchment. Their communication confirms our worst fears. A coordinated attack against Silverclaw territory is planned, targeting not just our borders, but the keep itself. Murmurs of concern rippled through the council. Victor continued, his voice carrying the perfect blend of urgency and control. Their forces gather even now, bolstered by mercenary wolves from eastern territories. We face unprecedented threat, requiring immediate decisive action. Alaric studied the parchment after breaking its seal, his expression revealing nothing. This details attack routes and timing with unusual specificity. Fortunate for our defense preparations, Victor noted. Or convenient for creating panic, Commander Gideon observed quietly from his position at Alaric's right. How was this messenger intercepted so easily when Northern Alliance operatives are known for exceptional stealth? Victor's eyes narrowed momentarily. Sometimes even our enemies make mistakes, Commander, or perhaps our border patrols deserve more credit than your question implies. The subtle rebuke silenced further challenge, though Arya noted several council members exchanging thoughtful glances. Alaric handed the parchment to Gideon for inspection before addressing the council. If this intelligence proves accurate, we must indeed prepare. However, verification before action remains prudent policy. His gaze swept the table. Commander Stormheart will double border patrols and implement defensive measures. Meanwhile, Lord Ambrose will activate our network of informants to confirm these claims through independent sources. Lord Ambrose, the elderly beta responsible for intelligence gathering, nodded solemnly. It shall be done, Alpha, though verifying such specific threats may require several days. Days we may not have, Victor interjected with controlled urgency. The message indicates attacks beginning within a week. Preparations must commence immediately. And so they shall, Alaric agreed reasonably. Defense preparations harm nothing if the threat proves exaggerated. However, I propose additional measures. He outlined a comprehensive strategy, strengthening the keep's defenses, recalling outlying pack members to central protection, establishing emergency protocols for civilians. Throughout his directives, Arya noticed a pattern. He assigned responsibilities to different council members in ways that would separate Victor's closest allies and limit their access to critical information. Victor himself received responsibility for coordinating civilian evacuation routes, important sounding but effectively removing him from military planning. The subtle power play wouldn't be evident to most, but Arya recognized its brilliance. Alaric was isolating potential conspirators while appearing to delegate authority appropriately. There remains one additional concern, Victor said as discussion concluded. The royal bloodline must be protected at all costs. I propose sending Prince Fenrir to our southern allies for safekeeping until this crisis passes. The suggestion landed like a stone in still water, rippling outward in silent tension. Fenrir stiffened in his chair, eyes widening with alarm. My son remains with me, Alaric stated flatly. With respect, Alpha, sentiment cannot outweigh security, Victor pressed, his voice gentle with manufactured concern. The prince is our future. If both of you remain in potential danger, my son remains with me, Alaric repeated, each word carved from granite. His safety is my personal responsibility, not one I delegate elsewhere. Victor bowed slightly in acquiescence, though Arya caught the flash of frustration quickly masked by respectful compliance. As you wish, Alpha. I only seek to serve the Pack's best interests. As do we all, Alaric concluded, effectively ending discussion. The council dispersed to their assigned duties, Victor departing with apparent acceptance of Alaric's decisions. When only Gideon, Fenrir, and Arya remained with the Alpha, Alaric's composed facade faltered slightly, revealing the strain beneath. He wants Fenrir separated from us, Gideon observed grimly. Where he'd be vulnerable to unfortunate accidents during transport, Alaric agreed, placing a protective hand on his son's shoulder. Fenrir looked between them, comprehension dawning on his young face. Lord Blackthorn is the shadow in wolf's clothing, he whispered. From my dreams. We suspect, Alaric corrected carefully, but suspicion without proof divides the pack when unity is essential. The intercepted message is forgery, Gideon stated with certainty. The seal appears authentic, but the phrasing doesn't match Northern Alliance communication patterns. They're creating false crisis to manipulate our movements, and possibly to separate the prince from our protection. Alaric nodded. We'll proceed as if the threat is legitimate while quietly investigating its source. Gideon, double the prince's guards, but only with warriors whose loyalty is unquestionable. Father, Fenrir spoke up, his voice stronger than his years would suggest. I had another dream last night. All attention turned to the boy. Arya moved closer, recognizing the significance of his voluntary disclosure. Mother showed me a hidden room beneath the East Tower, Fenrir continued. She pointed to stones arranged in a pattern like a crescent moon. When pressed in sequence, they revealed a chamber containing scrolls and a silver box. Alaric and Gideon exchanged meaningful glances. The East Tower contains our oldest archives, the Alpha mused. Sections sealed for generations, accessible only to the ruling Alpha and Luna. Helena spent considerable time there before her disappearance, Gideon recalled, researching ancient prophecies regarding the royal bloodline. If she discovered something threatening Victor's ambitions, Alaric didn't need to finish the thought. We should investigate immediately, Arya suggested, her concern for Fenrir overriding protocol. Agreed, Alaric decided, but quietly. Victor must believe we focus entirely on external threats while we uncover the internal ones. He knelt before his son, meeting his eyes directly. Fenrir, I need your courage now more than ever. You must continue your normal activities, giving no indication that anything has changed." The boy nodded solemnly. "I understand, Father." "Arya will remain with you constantly," Alaric continued. "At the first sign of danger, she'll bring you to my chambers through the secret passage connecting our rooms." "What about you?" Fenrir asked, worry creasing his brow. "I'll be investigating what your dreams have revealed," Alaric assured him. "Commander Stormheart will coordinate security while appearing to implement defense protocols against external threats." The plan established, they separated to maintain appearances. Arya accompanied Fenrir to his afternoon combat training, watching with heightened awareness as the prince practiced defensive maneuvers with his instructor. Despite the circumstances, the boy showed remarkable focus, his natural athleticism evident in each movement. "He has his father's instincts," observed a voice beside her. Arya turned to find Victor standing nearby, his approach having somehow escaped her notice. She masked her surprise with a respectful nod. "The prince works diligently at all his studies, Lord Blackthorn." "Indeed, such dedication in one so young." Victor watched Fenrir execute a complex defensive role. "One wonders how much he understands of our current situation." "Children often comprehend more than we credit," Arya replied carefully. "Quite so." Victor's gaze shifted to her, assessment evident in his expression. "You've integrated yourself remarkably well into the royal household, Omega Frostbloom, quite an advancement from mixing herbal remedies in your cottage." The observation carried veiled implications she couldn't ignore. "I serve where the Alpha commands, my lord. Naturally, though your influence extends beyond mere service, does it not? The prince adores you. Even the Alpha seems affected by your presence." His tone remained conversational, though his meaning was anything but casual. "One might almost suspect special talents beyond healing arts." Arya maintained composed neutrality despite internal alarm at his probing. "I simply provide stability for a child who has experienced significant loss." Victor clasped his hands behind his back, watching Fenrir with calculated interest. "Loss affects us all differently. Some find it unbearable. Others, transformative." His voice lowered to near whisper. "Luna Helena found transformation, I believe, from royal consort to something far more significant." The deliberate reference to Helena sent warning signals through Arya's awareness. Was he testing her knowledge, implying Helena had chosen to disappear rather than being taken? Before she could formulate a safe response, Victor continued. "Prophecies can be troublesome things," he mused, "especially those involving bloodlines and destiny. They create expectations, sometimes dangerous ones." "I wouldn't know about prophecies, my lord," Arya demurred. "No?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "How surprising, given your grandmother's renowned interest in ancient lore." Alara was quite the scholar of pack histories, particularly those concerning the Silver Wolf legends. The revelation that Victor had researched her family connections unsettled Arya deeply. She struggled to maintain her composed expression as he continued. "The Silver Wolf prophecy is particularly fascinating. A bloodline destined to unite all packs during the greatest darkness, when the marked ones rise from shadow. Quite poetic, though interpretations vary." "My grandmother shared herbal knowledge with me, not legends," Arya replied, hoping her racing heart wasn't audible to his keen senses. "Perhaps." Victor's gaze returned to Fenrir. "Though sometimes gifts skip generations, appearing unexpectedly in descendants. Healing abilities, prophetic dreams, special connections to ancient powers." The conversation had crossed from subtle probing to dangerous territory. Arya sensed Victor's deliberate attempt to gauge her knowledge, and possibly her own connection to these matters. "The prince completes his training soon," she observed, attempting to redirect. "I should prepare his healing lessons for afterward." "Of course," Victor acquiesced smoothly, "though I wonder what unique knowledge you impart during these private sessions. Perhaps I might observe someday, for educational purposes only." "If the Alpha permits," Arya responded, knowing Alaric would never allow it. Indeed, All follows from Alpha permission. Victor's smile thinned. For now, at least. Change comes to all things eventually, even the most established hierarchies. With that parting observation, he departed, leaving Arya chilled by implications beneath his words. She maintained her watchful position until Fenrir's training concluded, then escorted him swiftly to their chambers, securing the doors before reporting the conversation to Gideon. "He's growing bolder," the commander observed grimly. "Testing boundaries, assessing how much we know." "He mentioned the Silver Wolf prophecy specifically," Arya emphasized, "and implied my grandmother had special interest in these legends." "Did she?" Gideon asked directly. Arya hesitated. "She told stories of the first Alpha, a silver wolf who could communicate with the moon itself, receiving guidance that led our kind through ancient darkness. But she spoke of it as legend, not prophecy." "Legends often contain truth wrapped in metaphor," Gideon noted. "The Alpha is investigating the East Tower chamber Fenrir described. Until we know what Helena discovered there, remain vigilant. Victor's interest in your heritage suggests connections we don't yet understand." That evening, dinner in the royal dining hall proceeded with superficial normalcy. Lord Victor discussed civilian evacuation plans with apparent dedication. Other council members reported defense preparations progressing efficiently. Throughout the carefully orchestrated performance, Arya noted subtle positioning, Victor's allies seated strategically throughout the room, their attention repeatedly returning to Fenrir despite casual conversation. Alaric maintained regal composure, though the tightness around his eyes betrayed tension, visible only to those who knew him well. When the meal concluded, he announced his intention to review ancient defensive maps with Commander Stormheart, effectively excusing himself from further social interaction. As protocols dictated, Arya escorted Fenrir toward his chambers, while Alaric departed with Gideon. They had nearly reached the royal wing when urgent howls erupted from the courtyard below, the emergency signal indicating perimeter breach. Warriors rushed to defensive positions, civilians hurried to designated shelters, and chaos momentarily reigned in corridors previously ordered. Through the confusion, Arya maintained firm hold on Fenrir's hand, guiding him toward the safety of his chambers as instructed. They had nearly reached the royal wing when a group of warriors appeared ahead, led by one of Victor's closest allies, Beta Commander Kane. "Prince Fenrir," he called urgently, "Lord Blackthorn sends us to escort you to the central sanctuary. Northern Alliance scouts have been spotted within the outer walls." Arya tightened her grip on Fenrir's hand. "The Alpha instructed us to return to royal chambers," she countered, sensing deception beneath urgent tones. "The Alpha is currently engaged in defense coordination," Kane replied smoothly. "Lord Blackthorn acts with his authority to secure the royal heir." "Nevertheless, we'll continue to the prince's chambers," Arya insisted, trying to guide Fenrir around the warriors blocking their path. Kane's expression hardened. "This isn't a request, Omega. The prince comes with us now." Fenrir pressed closer to Arya's side. "I want to wait for my father," he declared with remarkable steadiness. "Your father is occupied ensuring your safety," Kane responded, his patience visibly thinning. "Now come." He reached for Fenrir's arm. Arya stepped between them instinctively. "The prince remains with me until the Alpha himself orders otherwise." The standoff hung suspended for crucial moments. Then Kane's diplomatic facade crumbled, replaced by cold determination. "Enough pretense. Take the boy. Kill the Omega." Everything happened with stunning rapidity. Warriors surged forward as Arya pushed Fenrir behind her, backing toward a side corridor she knew connected to servant passages. 3 betas transformed partially, claws extending from human hands as they advanced with lethal intent. "Run, Fenrir!" she commanded, shoving the boy toward the corridor. "Find your father!" Instead of fleeing alone, Fenrir grabbed her hand, pulling her alongside him as they bolted down the narrow passage. Behind them, pursuing footsteps and growls echoed against stone walls. They raced through servants' corridors rarely used by pack nobility, Fenrir leading with surprising confidence through passages he shouldn't have known. "Mother showed me these in my dreams," he gasped when Arya questioned his knowledge. She said I'd need them someday. They emerged into the lower kitchens, startling workers preparing evening meals. Without slowing, they continued through storage rooms and finally into a narrow tunnel Arya hadn't known existed, concealed behind grain storage. "This leads to the sacred caves," Fenrir explained as they hurried through darkness, guided only by occasional wall-mounted torches. Mother said it was the oldest passage, forgotten by most. The tunnel sloped downward, air growing cooler and damper with each step. Behind them, distant howls indicated their pursuers had discovered their escape route. Arya urged Fenrir to greater speed, wondering desperately how to contact Alaric or Gideon, and whether the attack at the perimeter was genuine or merely diversion for this kidnapping attempt. After what seemed endless flight, the tunnel widened into a massive cavern illuminated by phosphorescent fungi growing across walls and ceiling. Ancient symbols carved into stone surfaces glowed with faint blue light, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. At the cavern's center stood a circular stone altar, its surface stained dark with what Arya instinctively recognized as old blood. "The sacred caves," she whispered, recognizing the scene from Fenrir's descriptions of his dreams. "This way," the boy urged, tugging her toward a smaller passage on the far side. "There's another tunnel leading to the forest. We can find Father's warriors there." Before they could reach it, shadows materialized from side passages. 5 warriors blocked their path, partially shifted into wolf form while maintaining bipedal stance, the controlled partial transformation of experienced fighters. Each bore strange symbols painted in red across their exposed skin, matching the markings described on attacking wolves at the border outpost. "The Alpha's pup!" growled their apparent leader, a massive beta with ritual scars crisscrossing his face, "and his little Omega protector." They were surrounded, escape routes blocked by opponents far stronger than Arya could hope to defeat. She positioned herself before Fenrir nonetheless, determined to shield him with her body if nothing else. "You serve Lord Blackthorn," she stated, buying time while frantically seeking options. The scarred beta laughed harshly. "We serve powers beyond your comprehension, little healer. Lord Blackthorn merely facilitates our greater purpose." "Which is?" "The prophecy's fulfillment, of course." He gestured toward Fenrir with clawed hands, the last pure descendant of the Silver Wolf bloodline. His sacrifice will complete the ritual begun 3 years ago with his mother's blood. Horrified understanding dawned. "You killed Luna Helena." "Her blood opened the pathway," the beta confirmed callously. "But the full awakening requires completion through her offspring. The boy's blood on the sacred stones will release power dormant for centuries." Fenrir trembled against Arya's back, but spoke with remarkable courage. "You're lying. My father will find you, and he'll tear you apart." "Your father is rather occupied with a coordinated attack on the keep," the beta smirked. "By the time he realizes you're missing, the ritual will be complete. The Ancient Ones will rise again, and Lord Blackthorn will rule as their chosen vessel." As the cultists advanced, Arya felt desperation rising. Her healing abilities offered no defense against 5 trained warriors. Yet something stirred within her, an awareness beyond ordinary senses, a connection to energies pulsing through the ancient stones surrounding them. The wooden wolf carving in her pouch grew warm against her side. Without conscious decision, she reached for it, fingers closing around its familiar shape. Immediately, heat surged through her palm, spreading up her arm and throughout her body. The cavern's glowing symbols brightened in response, pulsing in rhythm with her racing heartbeat. "The Omega glows," hissed one cultist with superstitious fear. "She bears the mark." Arya glanced down, astonished to see silver light emanating from her skin, tracing patterns across her arms like luminous veins. The wooden carving in her hand had transformed, now appearing carved from pure silver that cast brilliant illumination throughout the cavern. "Impossible," breathed the lead beta. "The Silver Guardian awakens?" The moment of their stunned hesitation provided crucial opportunity. Arya grabbed Fenrir's hand, pulling him toward a side passage momentarily left unguarded. They fled deeper into the cave system, the silver light emanating from Arya illuminating their path without need for torches. "What's happening to you?" Fenrir gasped as they ran. "I don't know," Arya admitted, equally bewildered by her transformation. The strange energy flowing through her body felt simultaneously foreign and familiar, as if awakening something that had always existed dormant within her. Behind them, pursuit resumed with greater urgency, howls echoing through stone passages. The cultists now hunted them with increased desperation, their plans threatened by Arya's unexpected manifestation. The passages twisted and branched, forming a labyrinth that would have left them hopelessly lost without the silver light guiding their way. Arya realized with growing certainty that the wooden wolf, now silver, was somehow directing their path, pulling her toward specific turnings, as if following a predetermined route. Eventually they emerged into another large chamber, this one dominated by a pool of crystal-clear water at its center. The surface reflected their light with mirror-like perfection, creating the illusion of stars floating in darkness. "The moon pool," Fenrir whispered with recognition. "From my dreams." Before Arya could question this, a familiar voice called from the chamber's opposite side. "Arya! Fenrir!" Relief flooded through her as Alpha Alaric emerged from a passage, Commander Gideon and several elite warriors following close behind. The Alpha crossed the chamber in powerful strides, gathering his son into protective embrace before assessing Arya with astonished expression. "You're glowing with moon-silver light," he observed, wonder replacing his usual stoicism. "The wooden wolf transformed," she explained inadequately, holding out the silver carving that continued emanating brilliant light. "I don't understand what's happening." "I do," came another voice from the shadows. Lord Victor stepped into view, flanked by cultists bearing the same strange markings as those who had pursued them. "The Silver Guardian has awakened. How inconveniently timed." Alaric pushed Fenrir behind him, positioning himself protectively before both his son and Arya. Gideon and the royal guards formed defensive semicircle, weapons ready. "Your treachery ends here, Victor," Alaric declared, his voice carrying alpha command. "Surrender now and face pack justice with some small remnant of dignity." Victor laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally in the cavern. "Justice? You speak of justice while clinging to unearned power? Your bloodline stole leadership from those more deserving when the first Silver Wolf bound all packs under his tyranny. Tonight, we reclaim our rightful place." "By murdering a child?" Gideon challenged with disgust. "By sacrificing an innocent boy for your twisted ambitions?" "By fulfilling prophecy," Victor corrected, his expression transformed with fanatical conviction. "The blood of the last Silver Wolf descendant, spilled upon the sacred altar, releases powers dormant for centuries. The marked ones will rise again, and I shall lead them into glorious ascendance." "You killed my mate," Alaric growled, alpha power vibrating through each word. "For this madness." "Helena discovered our plans too soon," Victor confirmed without remorse. "Her sacrifice began the awakening. Her son's blood will complete it." His gaze shifted to Arya, calculating assessment replacing momentary surprise. "Though the unexpected appearance of a Silver Guardian complicates matters. Your grandmother hid your heritage well, little Omega." "My grandmother was a healer," Arya protested, though doubt crept through her certainty as the silver light continued flowing through her veins. "Ilara was far more," Victor countered. "Last descendant of the Guardian bloodline, sworn protectors of the Silver Wolf heirs. I wondered why she hid in our territory, disguised as common healer. Now I understand. She protected you until you could fulfill your purpose." The revelation staggered Arya. Could her grandmother have concealed such monumental truth? Yet the silver energy coursing through her body, the transformed carving, the strange connection she'd felt to Fenrir from their first meeting, all suggested Victor's words contained truth, however distorted by his madness. "Enough talk," Alaric declared, his body tensing for combat. "Your cult ends tonight, Victor." "I think not," Victor replied with disturbing confidence. He raised his arms, speaking words in ancient language Arya somehow recognized, though had never heard. The symbols carved throughout the cavern flared with red light, responding to his invocation. The confrontation erupted into chaos. Victor's cultists attacked with coordinated precision, while Alaric and his warriors defended with equal skill. The cavern filled with snarls, flashing claws, and the metallic scent of blood as partial transformations blurred the line between human and wolf combatants. Arya pulled Fenrir toward the chamber's edge, seeking shelter behind stone formations. The silver light surrounding her intensified with her fear, creating protective barrier that cultists seemed reluctant to approach directly. The wooden wolf, now silver, pulsed in her grasp as if alive. Through the battle's chaos, she watched Alaric fighting with alpha power fully unleashed, his speed and strength unmatched even against multiple opponents. Victor had transformed partially as well, his lean form revealing surprising combat prowess beneath his scholarly appearance. "We need to reach the altar chamber," Fenrir shouted over the fighting. "Mother said it's where everything must end." "Too dangerous," Arya protested, watching cultists specifically targeting paths toward that area. "The wolf will protect us," Fenrir insisted, pointing at the silver carving. "It's calling us there. Can't you feel it?" Indeed, Arya felt unmistakable pulling sensation, the carving subtly directing her attention toward passages leading deeper into the cave system. Against rational judgment, she found herself responding to this intuitive guidance, gathering Fenrir close as they used the battle's distraction to slip toward an unguarded side passage. Alaric spotted their movement amid his combat. Understanding flickered in his eyes, followed by decisive action. He broke away from his current opponent, cutting path directly toward Victor with focused fury. Commander Gideon immediately adjusted strategy, directing royal guards to create protective corridor, allowing Arya and Fenrir passage, while Alaric engaged the cult leader directly. "Go!" Alaric commanded as he intercepted Victor's attempt to pursue them. "Find the truth!" They fled down twisting passages, the silver light illuminating ancient symbols covering every surface. Arya recognized some from her grandmother's teachings: protection, binding, sealing, while others remained mysterious yet somehow familiar, as if knowledge long forgotten stirred within her consciousness. The passage eventually opened into the chamber Fenrir had described from his dreams, the central altar room where Helena's blood had been spilled. Unlike the previous chambers, this one featured a perfect circle of stones surrounding a raised platform carved with intricate symbols. A massive crystal embedded in the ceiling focused moonlight directly onto the altar surface, creating ethereal illumination. "This is where it happened," Fenrir whispered, his voice tight with emotion. "Where they hurt Mother." Arya squeezed his hand supportively as they approached the sacred space. The silver wolf carving grew almost painfully hot in her grasp, its light synchronizing with the moonbeam striking the altar. When she stepped into the stone circle, energy surged through the ground beneath her feet, ancient symbols illuminating in sequence around the perimeter. "Something's happening," Fenrir observed, pressing closer to her side. The wooden wolf, now completely silver, levitated from Arya's palm, floating before them in the chamber's center. It rotated slowly, catching moonlight from every angle until suddenly projecting concentrated beam toward the altar's side. Where the light touched, stone shifted and receded, revealing hidden compartment. Within lay a small silver box, an ancient scroll sealed with wax bearing crescent moon insignia. Fenrir reached for them without hesitation, recognizing them from his dreams. "Mother showed me these. She said they contained truth that would defeat the darkness." Before they could examine these treasures, commotion echoed from the passage behind them. Victor emerged, blood streaming from wounds, yet his eyes burning with fanatical determination. He had partially transformed, his features elongated into wolf-like muzzle while maintaining human speech capability. "The prophecy will be fulfilled," he snarled, advancing with predatory intent. "The boy's blood upon the sacred altar, the guardian's power extinguished, the ancient ones shall rise again." Arya pushed Fenrir behind her, the silver light surrounding her flaring defensively. "You've misinterpreted the prophecy, Victor. True power doesn't come through sacrifice of innocents, but through protection of them." "Pretty words from a child playing with forces beyond her comprehension," he sneered, continuing his measured approach. "Your grandmother hid knowledge from you, little guardian, the fullness of your heritage and its ultimate purpose." My grandmother taught me healing, Arya countered, struggling to understand her transformation, even as she defended against his advance. To mend wounds, not create them. Healing is merely one manifestation of the Guardian's power, Victor revealed with disturbing glee. The ability to channel lunar energy, to heal or harm, to protect or destroy. The perfect counterbalance to the Silver Wolf's strength. The revelation struck Arya like physical blow. Her grandmother had indeed taught her more than simple herbal remedies, meditation techniques focusing on energy flow, ancient languages disguised as healing chants, the wooden wolf carving passed through generations, not mere superstition, but preparation for heritage she couldn't have imagined. Victor lunged suddenly, faster than she anticipated. His clawed hand struck her shoulder, drawing blood that spattered across the altar's surface. Instantly, the stone absorbed it, ancient symbols flaring crimson in response. Arya stumbled backward, maintaining protective position before Fenrir despite her injury. "Your blood holds power too," Victor gloated, circling for another attack. "Not as potent as the Silver Wolf heirs, but useful for preliminary awakening." The chamber trembled, dust falling from the ceiling as energy built within the stone circle. The altar began emitting pulsing crimson light in counterpoint to Arya's silver illumination. "The awakening begins," Victor exulted. 3 bloods upon the sacred stone, Luna, Guardian, and finally Alpha Heir, the triumvirate that seals our covenant with ancient powers. He advanced again, but before reaching them, a massive form burst through the passage entrance. Alpha Alaric, fully transformed into his enormous wolf form, launched himself at Victor with unstoppable momentum. They collided with bone-crushing impact, rolling across the chamber floor in blur of fangs and claws. The 2 combatants separated, circling each other with predatory focus. Victor completed his transformation into wolf form, smaller than Alaric's massive shape, but marked with glowing red symbols that pulsed with unnatural power. They clashed again, their battle destroying ancient artifacts and damaging stone formations with each impact. Arya clutched Fenrir close, sheltering within her silver light as the chamber shuddered from the Alpha battle's ferocity. The boy clutched the recovered box and scroll, his expression determined despite obvious fear. "We need to open these," he insisted. "Mother said they contain the true ritual, the one that seals the darkness instead of releasing it." With trembling fingers, Arya broke the scroll's wax seal. Ancient text filled the parchment, written in language she shouldn't have understood yet somehow could read, knowledge awakening within her as the guardian powers manifested fully. "It's a binding ritual," she realized aloud, "not for releasing ancient powers, but containing them. The 3 bloods aren't for awakening darkness, but sealing it forever, willingly given, not forcefully taken." Understanding crystallized with sudden clarity. Luna Helena hadn't been random victim, but had discovered Victor's cult and their misinterpretation of prophecy. She'd researched the true ritual, hiding evidence where her son might eventually find it through their shared dream-walking abilities connected to their Silver Wolf bloodline. Meanwhile, Alaric and Victor's battle reached crescendo. Despite the Alpha's superior strength, Victor's unnatural enhancements from cult rituals created dangerous equality. Blood from both combatants spattered across the chamber, some drops landing upon the altar where they sizzled and were absorbed into the stone. "Father's losing," Fenrir whispered with horror as Victor's enhanced attacks drove Alaric backward, inflicting increasingly serious wounds. The silver box in Fenrir's hands suddenly sprang open, revealing its contents, a ceremonial dagger with silver blade and moonstone hilt, alongside small vial containing red liquid. "Mother's blood," Fenrir identified with certainty. She left it knowing it would be needed. Arya studied the ritual scroll with desperate intensity, understanding flowing through her awakened guardian senses. The prophecy requires willing sacrifice, 3 drops freely given from Luna, Guardian, and Alpha Heir upon the sacred stone while speaking the binding words. "Then we complete what Mother started," Fenrir declared with conviction beyond his years. He unstoppered the vial with careful movements. "Tell me what to do." The chamber's energies intensified as Victor gained advantage, driving Alaric against the wall with savage attacks. The Alpha fought valiantly despite multiple wounds, his determination to protect his son evident in every movement. Arya made instant decision based on instinct and newfound knowledge. "We must reach the altar. 3 drops from each of us, freely given while I speak the binding words." Together they edged toward the chamber's center, using Arya's silver protective light as shield against the savage combat nearby. When they reached the altar, Fenrir carefully tipped the vial, allowing exactly 3 drops of Helena's preserved blood to fall upon the central symbol. "Guardian next," he whispered. Arya took the ceremonial dagger, its silver blade humming with energy against her transformed skin. With steady hand, she made tiny cut across her palm, allowing 3 drops of her blood to fall beside Helena's. The symbols illuminated with combined silver-blue light, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. "Now you," she instructed Fenrir, though uncertainty clouded her resolve. Asking a child to shed blood, even symbolically, felt wrong despite the ritual's necessity. The boy extended his hand without hesitation. "For mother, for father, for our pack," he declared solemnly. Before the dagger could touch his skin, Victor disengaged from combat with savage backward leap, sensing the ritual's progression. "No!" he howled, launching toward them with desperate speed. Alaric intercepted midair, his massive form crashing into the cult leader with bone-crushing impact. They tumbled across the chamber, locked in mortal combat mere feet from the altar. "Complete it!" Alaric commanded, his voice somehow communicating through wolf form. "Now!" Arya's hand trembled as she made smallest possible cut across Fenrir's offered palm. 3 drops of his blood joined the others upon the sacred stone. Immediately, the combined essences sank into the altar, illuminating all chamber symbols with brilliant white light that banished shadows completely. Ancient words flowed from Arya's lips without conscious thought, language of binding, of sealing, of eternal containment for darkness that would consume all. As she spoke, her silver light expanded outward, engulfing both Fenrir and the altar in protective cocoon. Victor broke free from Alaric's hold, hurling himself toward them in final desperate attempt to stop the ritual. "The Ancient Ones promised power," he howled, his form distorting as unnatural energies coursed through him. "They cannot be denied their freedom." The ritual reached culmination as Victor leaped toward them. Arya's final word echoed through the chamber with physical force, releasing concentrated power through her outstretched hands. Silver-white energy engulfed Victor midair, suspending him momentarily before compressing inward with terrible finality. His howl transformed from rage to terror as the binding magic consumed the dark energies sustaining him. His form collapsed inward, red symbols burning away as their power drained into the altar's binding mechanism. Within moments, nothing remained of the once powerful Beta but dust scattering across the chamber floor. Silence fell, broken only by Alaric's labored breathing as he forced partial transformation back to human form despite his injuries. He stumbled toward them, collapsing beside the altar as the chamber's energies gradually stabilized. "You did it," he managed, reaching for his son with bloodied hand. "You completed Helena's work." Fenrir launched himself into his father's arms while Arya knelt beside them, her healer's instincts asserting themselves despite her exhaustion. Her silver light dimmed to gentle glow as she assessed Alaric's numerous wounds, channeling her newly understood guardian energy toward healing rather than binding. "Some of these are serious," she murmured, hands moving with enhanced skill over the deepest injuries. Wherever her silver-tinged touch passed, wounds began closing at accelerated rate beyond normal alpha healing capability. "The ritual?" Alaric questioned through pain. "Complete," Arya confirmed. "The binding successful. Whatever ancient evil Victor sought to release remains sealed, perhaps permanently this time." Footsteps approached through the passage entrance. Commander Gideon appeared, bloodied but standing, accompanied by surviving royal guards. His expression registered shock at the scene before him. The illuminated altar, Arya's silver-veined appearance, Victor's absence. "The cult leader?" he questioned tersely. "Consumed by his own ritual," Alaric answered with grim satisfaction. The binding turned his power against him. Gideon nodded acceptance of this explanation, then gestured toward the passage. The remaining cultists either fled or surrendered when their symbols began burning away. The attack on the keep was repelled. We should return before rumors spread. Alaric struggled to stand, accepting support from both Arya and his son. Helena's final gift to us, he observed, nodding toward the altar where the three bloods had completed what his mate began 3 years earlier. She knew this day would come. She showed me through dreams, Fenrir confirmed, wisdom beyond his years evident in his solemn expression. She never abandoned us. She was protecting us even after death. As they made their way from the sacred caves, Arya's transformation gradually subsided, silver light retreating beneath her skin, though she sensed it remained accessible now that it had awakened. The wooden wolf carving had returned to normal appearance, though occasional silver gleam caught the light when viewed from certain angles. 3 months passed with remarkable swiftness. Spring transformed Silverclaw territory from winter's grip to vibrant renewal, mirroring the pack's own rebirth following Victor's conspiracy. Those cultists who surrendered faced pack justice, revealing the extent of corruption Victor had seeded throughout multiple territories. With these elements removed, relations between packs stabilized, the threatened Northern Alliance attacks proving fabrication designed to create opportunity for the cult's final ritual. Arya's position evolved beyond mere caretaker to officially recognized guardian of the royal bloodline, an ancient title restored with full council approval. Her healing abilities, enhanced by awakened lunar energies, served the pack while she continued Fenrir's education in both healing arts and his own emerging abilities. The prince flourished under combined guidance of father and guardian. His nightmares faded, replaced by occasional prophetic dreams that now brought wisdom rather than terror. The trauma of his mother's loss remained, but understanding the truth of her sacrifice provided healing impossible otherwise. On the spring equinox, Arya stood at the edge of the training grounds, watching as Fenrir practiced combat forms with his father. The boy's movements showed remarkable improvement, his confidence growing daily. Beside her, Commander Gideon, now promoted to Beta Prime, observed with approving nod. "He'll make a formidable alpha someday," Gideon remarked. "With balanced strength," Arya added. "He understands healing as well as combat, compassion alongside authority." "Thanks to you," Gideon's typically stoic expression softened momentarily. "The Alpha made wise choice binding you to his household, even before understanding your true heritage." Arya's hand drifted to the silver wolf pendant, now openly displayed at her throat. The wooden carving transformed permanently during formal ceremony, acknowledging her guardian status. "My grandmother prepared me without revealing the fullness of our bloodline. Sometimes I wonder how differently things might have unfolded had I known earlier." "Perhaps not as effectively," Gideon suggested. "Sometimes innocence preserves perspectives that knowledge would alter." Their conversation paused as Alaric and Fenrir completed their session, approaching with matching expressions of satisfaction after productive training. The Alpha's wounds had healed completely under Arya's care, though scars remained as permanent reminders of sacrifices made. "You're hovering again," Alaric observed with unusual lightness as he reached them. Recent months had gradually softened his typically stern demeanor, revealing capacity for warmth previously masked by leadership burdens. "Observing," Arya corrected with smile. "There's difference." "Semantics," he countered, though affection warmed his tone. Their relationship had evolved gradually, from suspicion to trust, from alliance to something deeper, neither had yet defined completely. The pack watched this development with careful interest, recognizing potential implications for future leadership. Fenrir tugged at Arya's hand. "Can we visit Mother's memorial today? I want to tell her about my new defensive technique." The memorial garden established in Helena's honor had become regular destination for them, a peaceful space acknowledging her sacrifice while celebrating her continuing influence through her son's life. Arya nodded agreement, squeezing the boy's hand gently. "Of course. Your father will join us after his council meeting?" Alaric confirmed with nod. Brief administrative matters only. Afterward, perhaps we might discuss that journey to the southern territories you've been advocating. Fenrir should indeed see more of the world beyond our borders." The suggestion carried implications beyond simple travel plans. The southern territories contained ancient libraries where guardian histories were preserved. Knowledge Arya sought to understand her awakened heritage fully. Additionally, such journey would represent first official diplomatic appearance of the Alpha family with Arya in her new capacity, public acknowledgement of changing relationship dynamics. As they walked together toward the keep, Fenrir between them, Arya reflected on transformations spanning mere months, from solitary healer to guardian, from outsider to essential member of leadership circle, from lonely existence to found family. The path ahead held uncertainties and challenges, particularly as neighboring packs adjusted to Silverclaw's renewed strength and the re-emergence of guardian bloodline after centuries. Yet whatever came, they would face it together. Alpha strength and guardian wisdom united with the future embodied in young Prince who carried both bloodlines within him. The Silver Wolf prophecy continued unfolding, not through blood sacrifice as Victor had believed, but through protection, healing, and balanced leadership combining traditional strength with compassionate understanding. The ancient binding ritual hadn't merely sealed away darkness, it had opened pathway toward light, toward unity, toward future where power served rather than dominated. As spring sunshine warmed their path toward home, Arya felt certainty settle within her awakened guardian senses. This was merely beginning of their shared story, one that would reshape not just Silverclaw territory, but perhaps all wolfkind in generations to come.